Hello, it's Thursday. Am I here? I'm getting a spinning circle. I hope we're here. And we are going to do many bridges. So you can get ready for your glutes and hamstrings to fire up. If you want to just watch, that's cool. If you want to play along, you can use, we're going to use a bunch of props. So whatever you want to modify for, you want maybe a weight or a couple of toning balls or small hand weights, stretchy band, ring band if you have such a thing, squishy ball, yoga block. There's lots of different ways we can play with bridges to make them more challenging, less challenging, just more fun, a little bit more interesting to do. So let's get started. So your basic bridge, the first thing we're going to play with is speed and pacing. So you can play around with where you put your feet so that you get the best sense of firing into your glutes. We're not necessarily looking for the closest you can get your feet into your butt, right? You don't have to pull that in that much. You find the spot that where you feel when you push your heels down into the floor, you get the best access to your hips, to your glutes. So we're going to start going really slowly. You're going to keep your chest heavy, press your heels down into the floor, and press your hips up. So we're looking for that sense of internal resistance. Hey, hi. And then slide back down. And press up. And you're going slowly so that you have time to feel the effort. You have time to feel whether your chest is staying heavy. You're having time to feel the length in your quads. Your time to feel the weight of your heels into the floor. That sense of pulling your heels towards your butt and your butt towards your heels to really emphasize the work in the backs of your legs and the back of your hips. So going slowly is a really good way to make this a more technical experience where you have time to observe your geometry and your loads. Or you could speed it up and you could go quickly. You are more likely to end up kind of blowing past your boundaries, going with your patterns, whatever they might be. Maybe your knees go out to the side, maybe your chest lifts a little bit, but that's okay because we're looking for variation. So you can pick up the pace. Do you want to go all the way down to the floor and all the way up, or do you want to go up and then do a little fast pulse at the top? Or, and this is kind of what people would intuitively do, but you could get a whole bunch of benefit by doing a quick little press up from the floor, right? Going into the low hover position gets a totally different part of your glutes working. So that's the first really great variation. Doesn't require a prop, doesn't require you do anything special, but it really changes what happens with your glutes, and it changes. And this is the thing that I think is most interesting about these variations. It changes what's happening in your brain. It's changing how your brain is connecting to the movement. Those different paces really make a different movement experience because you're focusing on different things. So that's one of the variations that you can add in to make bridges be something different. So if you're a teacher, part of what I think is great about what we're going to do today is you can take the same exercise, you can refine it for different clients, for different classes, for different levels of expertise, for different levels of injury or a special need. And it means you don't get bored as the teacher and your clients don't get bored, but you're still consistently building motor skills. You're consistently building that sense of agency and control. When you do something a bunch of times in different ways, it gives your brain the opportunity to learn it better. So the next thing, and we kind of started with this, what about height? So we did this a little bit just a moment ago in terms of speed, but you could also do it in terms of endurance. The tendency when we go into bridge is to kind of find the highest position we can get into. So if I go really high, I'm coming up onto the tops of my shoulders, I'm using my hamstrings, my glutes, and my back muscles, and I'm lifting my whole entire, this is more of a curve shape, right? So that's one option. That's quite different from bringing my shoulder blades down, feeling some weight across the top of my rib cage, bringing my ribs in line with my pelvis, along in line with my thighs, reaching my knees towards the walls in front of me. So play around with that. As long as this feels okay for you to go higher. It's not supposed to put strain on your back. We're still doing most of the drive from your legs. But you get this opening lift. Maybe you add some arm support. How does that feel in comparison to dropping your shoulder blades? You might feel more abdominal work here, right? You get your abs connecting from the base of your ribs through to your pelvis. But what happens if you come down another couple of inches? You're still so connecting your heels into the floor. You're still pulling your heels towards your butt, but you come down. Oh my gosh, totally changes which parts of your glutes fire. What happens if you come down another couple of inches? It's not, for me at least, it's not getting any easier. It might actually be getting harder in terms of my actual glute work when I come down closer to the floor. So this is a terrific thing to introduce as you go through a bridge, as you go through a class. If you're making that theme, if you're going through a whole series of bridges, you could absolutely be playing with the height instead of just going for whatever your brain originally thinks. Oh, this is what a bridge is. Give your brain options and your booty will love you. So that would be option number 2, is to play with the height. Now, you could also, so that's height of your hips from the floor, but you could also play with the height of your feet from the floor. You could play with 1 foot at a time, right? So yoga block under 1 foot. So now you've got this asymmetry happening. That's going to change what your hips are doing. It changes what your obliques are doing. You start to play with kind of an oblique sling action when you start to do things asymmetrically. So you could do that. Pop it over onto the other foot. So if you don't have a yoga block, you could be using a cushion or a book or a half dome, just something that's going to get 1 foot a little higher off the floor. You're still keeping your pelvis level, so even though 1 foot is higher, that hip is not higher. And then you come on back down. You could put both feet higher, and that's going to change the geometry of the shape. And so that changes things for your brain and for your body again. And come on back down. In terms of height, you could also be thinking about height of pelvis. So you come up into your bridge and then bring 1 hip down. So now you've got different heights. You're using your glutes more on one side, less on the other. You're using your abdominal muscles differently. You come back to center. You bring the right hip higher. Let your left hip slide down and come on back to center, and then ease down to the floor. So that can be a really good one. You can also add some resistance. So bringing a band of whatever density you happen to have, or a pair of tights is good, down onto the floor. You want to hold your arms onto the floor, take a breath in, and then press your hips up into the extra resistance of the band. This one is great if you tend towards hypermobility, or if you work with clients who are really mobile, who have a hard time feeling where their bodies are in space. This is a really nice tool to add a little bit of stability, a little bit of sense of body, and where your body is in space and where your body is in relationship to itself. Also a nice one for people who have a hard time feeling their glutes in a bridge. This is a good addition. So I like this one. And you could also add the resistance around your legs. So ring bands are great for this. But if you don't have a ring band, just a long band wrapped around your thighs, you press your legs out a little bit and you push up and you slide back down. You've just changed it again. Now we've added more lateral hip, more lateral glute strength. Your gluteus medius now has to participate as you press up and down. Might be a slightly smaller range, and that's totally okay. And then you slide back down. So adding that sense of resistance is a really good additional tool. Gosh, we're only not even halfway through. Balance is a great addition to a bridge. You can challenge your balance by putting something unstable under your foot or your feet as you press up. So that changes, so that because this is wobbly, I now have to use more hamstrings to hold my foot in place. I'm having to use more work on my left side because my right side is less stable. This is a super squishy ball. You could do this with a firmer ball and that would be great. So that's one way to challenge your balance. And just while we have the ball here, we can deviate quickly to, of course, you could also put the ball or the block in between your legs and go for adding inner thigh, which doesn't fit into this list quite so specifically, but just as a side benefit. You can also challenge your balance by taking one foot off the floor, which also fits nicely into position. But if you take one foot off the ground, wherever you want to put that one foot, now you have to create all the support on the other side. And if you're trying to keep your pelvis leveled, so both hips are the same distance from the ceiling, and centered so that you stay in line with your heel and your shoulders, that's a nice little balance challenge. You could do this on your toes. You could do it on your heels. Anything that you change in terms of how much of your body is on the floor will affect your balance. So you could reach your arms for the ceiling and lose the arm support and then add a leg movement, keeping your balance centered. It's going to require a whole bunch more core work. You're still getting tons of leg work, I promise, but you're adding an element of core work because you've added the balance challenge. So then the next thing would be to think about position. So you can do a bunch of different stuff, mostly in terms of leg position for this one. So you have your basic up and down, right? You could add a little bit of an upper body curl. You want to make sure that you're not just pulling your head up off the floor, you're actually curving your upper spine. And then know that you're not going to come very high off the floor in terms of your bridge. So that's an addition. But mostly it's about leg stuff. So you could bring one leg up into tabletop. You could cross that leg over into a figure 4. And you could come up this way. No problem with that change. You can come up and then add more leg movement. So you change the position of your shin, moving at your knee joint. You could come all the way up towards the ceiling. This is a traditional Pilates movement. Press down, point, and float back up. You're trying to keep your pelvis stable, your ribs and your shoulders stable as you change the position of your leg in your hip socket without changing anything else, right? So everything else stays nice and planted and stable and solid. You could always add some weights. So now you go back into your bridge. Now we're adding an element of upper body movement, which is obviously not part of the hip part of the bridge, but why not change it up? Add some soldier arms. Add both arms sliding back. You could go for circles. Right, so you're now combining, changing your load and changing your position. No reason why we have to keep this simple. We can add multiple things changing at the same time. So I really like this whole series adding a bunch of arm movement to the bridge, because now you have to do endurance through your hips because you're holding in place for a nice long time while you do strength and mobility for your arms and your shoulders. So that's a good one. And then there's position, there's rotation, adding an element of rotation to your legs in your hip sockets. So for a bridge, that would mean coming into a turnout position. So you are planting your heels into the floor, flex your ankles, so the fronts of your feet are off the floor, and then create the turn of your legs and your hip sockets right from up by your hips until the outside edges of your feet press into the floor, if that range is available to you, and then press up into your position from there, and you could add all the other stuff. You could do this with weights, you could do this with arm movement, you could do this with resistance, with a band around your legs, you could do this playing with your height, you could do this playing with your speed. All of those things could be added or combined with changing the position of your leg in your hips or your legs in your hip sockets. So now we've added the deep rotators, or we've enhanced the connection of the deep rotators into what is already a very hip driven motion. And you can see how that feels. That one, you want to be careful of that one if you have a labral injury. If you get hip pain when you go into that range, into that position, then obviously that's not a great one for you. But if you struggle to feel your glutes, to feel the work in your hips when you're doing bridges, maybe the solution is just to change your bridge and to give your brain the opportunity to try something different. So there you go, 15 minutes of many different options for how you could be doing your bridges. And we will gather again next Thursday. I'll put the replay up as soon as this is done. And if you have questions, you can pop them into the comments down below, and I will come back in and answer them later. And if you're watching this and you're a movement teacher and you're like, man, I wish I could be on video, I have a new free mini course for you, and I will link to that down below as well. It's a little half-hour how to be confident on camera, even if you are not one of the cool kids and you're not part of the tattooed in crowd. You can totally make videos and have fun doing it. All right, mwah. Bye. See you next week.